This is the second webinar of the series. So the purpose of this webinar series is to give you the tools and resources that you need to invest in real estate, follow your dreams, and to strive for more financial security in your life. So today's topic is identifying the right property, the how-to guide, and the next sessions will cover the facts and figures, the numbers behind the deal, next Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. Then it'll be people matter. Who do you need to have on your team in order to really, just wanted to check the chat box, make sure that we were all good to go. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Cool. Very good. Thank you so much. So then it'll be people matter. Who do you need to have on your team? And the final session will be next steps and developing your action plan to actually put everything that you learn into action. So I want to start off by saying I hope everybody is really enjoying quarantine as best as possible, staying safe, spending time doing what you love, taking action on something that's important to you, and just enjoying this time of resetting, reflecting, and planning. So I want to take a minute and talk just about gratitude in general. I think gratitude is one of the most important things that we can all think about at this time. I'm eternally grateful for this opportunity to speak with you today because I know that every conversation that we have is an opportunity to change somebody's life and just to radiate light, love, happiness, and good energy, right? So by the grace of God, I'm here today, and everything that I have and who I am is because of that. And, you know, every conversation that I have with a prospective client as a real estate agent or with you here today, opportunity to change somebody's life. So the light always wins. We might be in a dark time right now, but I do believe that the light always wins, and everything that happens, even if it might not be able to be seen in this moment, is good. So right now, we're in what many people are calling a crisis, and I would agree it is a crisis situation, right? Real estate, you know, thankfully is a needed service in the United States and New Jersey, so we're still able to practice. But in Chinese, the word crisis doesn't only signify danger, it also signifies opportunity. So this crisis is, yes, dangerous, but it's also an opportunity. So before I get started with today's session, I want to give you an outline of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to discuss a couple of quotes by my favorite mentor, Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn actually passed away in 2009, but I still consider him a mentor because his message lives on and on in the hearts of many men and women. So a couple of those quotes real quick. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Going to school will not make you rich, but deciding to educate yourself beyond the classroom will reap dividends greater than you can imagine. Another quote, if you go to work on your goals will go to work on you. If you work on your plan will also go to work on you. Whatever good things we build end up building us. So what I take that as is we are built by our dreams just as much as we build our own dreams. They build us up or they break us down. And we develop who we are and our character by putting forth goals and action on those goals. So the next one, we must all wage an intense lifelong battle against the constant downward pull. If we relax, the bugs and weeds of negativity will move into our garden and take away everything of value. So what I take away from this is no matter how successful you are, no matter how much money you have coming in and where you are in life, you must tend to your garden. You must tend to the garden of your business, of your marriage, of your mind, and make sure to cultivate your life like a bed of flowers and make it as beautiful as possible. So that takes courage, it takes love, and it takes really living and being alive in your life. So the next thing that he covers, that one of my favorite quotes by him, is repetition is the mother of all skill. So perfect practice makes perfect. If you do something one time, you're not going to become a master. If you do something repeatedly over and over and over again, or you learn something over and over and over again, you're only going to get better. So if you want to be good at something, repeat it over and over. And that's why the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to review what we went over last week. So first we're going to review. Then we're going to go over the 5 keys to success in rental investing. Then we're going to talk about the different types of rental properties. We're going to go over location and picking the right area. And then we're going to talk about how to find rental properties. And then I'll wrap us up and tell you what we're going to be doing the next couple of weeks. So this is a quick review of what we did last week, real quick. So We covered something called Johari's window. So this is meant to help us all understand and get on the same playing field that there are certain things that we don't know, and we all have blind spots. And the most dangerous words that you can say to yourself when you're learning something new is that I already know this, or I don't need to learn this because I already know it, right? Because sometimes there might be another thing that you'll grab that you haven't heard before, or that might affect you differently because you're a different person now than you were a year ago or a while ago. Right? So next thing, there's a quote by a man named Armstrong Williams that is, now one thing I tell everyone is to learn about real estate. Repeat after me. Real estate provides the highest returns, the greatest values, and the least risk. So asking the question to yourself, why do real estate investors and business owners have the most tax breaks? The wealthy families who created the laws which govern our society have all owned businesses and real estate. So the IRS code was made by them to incentivize business ownership and real estate ownership. That's what the government wants us to do. It wants us to serve other people, have places for people to live, develop businesses, because employees pay taxes. So we want to build businesses. We want to have employees that are paying the government's tax, paying our taxes, right? So the ones who wrote the laws wanted to help themselves, but we can also take advantage of those same laws by being business owners and real estate investors first and foremost. So we also covered building your financial intelligence, tracking your net worth, tracking your spending. We covered investing in yourself, building your network, and focusing on what you can control rather than what you can't control. We covered the cash flow quadrant, being employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. So the E quadrant is the employee, the S quadrant is the self-employed, and those are great, but most of the rich people live in business and investor quadrants. So the B and the I quadrant, which is on the right side of the cash flow quadrant. This is a term that you can look up that Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, publicized. So that's called the cash flow quadrant. So the B and I categories, they provide for more long-term passive income. So ask yourself, which quadrant do you want to be in? I compare the E and S categories kind of like riding a bicycle. In order to keep the wheel spinning, you have to keep pushing over and over and over again. But as a business owner and as an investor, you just push once and they go for a little while. It's like putting an engine or a battery on your bike. Then we covered assets versus liabilities, how an asset puts money in your pocket each month and a liability takes money out of your pocket each month. Then we covered the advantages of real estate. Positive cash flow is the first one. Income minus expenses minus debt service equals positive cash flow. We'll cover this in our later session next week when we go over numbers in detail and really talk about the math behind the deal. Then we talked about leverage, so how you can use debt to leverage your available cash and make higher rates of return than on the interest that you might pay for a loan. Then we also covered how investing in real estate helps you to build assets faster. So as your tenants pay their rent, it pays down the mortgage balance, the principal balance on your mortgage, and your equity increases so you can build your assets faster. The next thing that's an advantage of real estate is hedging against inflation. So real estate is a natural inflation hedge. So your property appreciates at a faster rate on average, then the dollar is actually decreasing in value, or what we call inflation, right? The next way that you make money in real estate and its advantage is increased tax advantages. So you can write off all the interest on your mortgages. You can write off depreciation, which is different for commercial and residential real estate. We covered that in the last session. There are also like-kind exchanges or 1031 exchanges that provide tax benefits and tax breaks when you take your capital gains from one property and immediately invest in another. We also said that real estate has no early withdrawal fees like other retirement vehicles, and there's no penalties for insider trading. So that's great for real estate agents, right? Now we're gonna jump into some new stuff, some new information, which I'm really excited to share with y'all. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and you'll see this PowerPoint presentation. So that was a review from last week. The next thing that we're going to cover today are the 5 keys to rental property success. So if anybody here has read the book Think and Grow Rich, it's one of my favorite books. I'm listening to it for a 4th time right now. he says, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. It all starts with the mind. It all starts with what you're thinking about and how you're thinking. So the first key to rental property success is thinking the right thoughts. So you can do this rather than thinking, I can't do this, right? You can make it happen no matter what. If investing and growing your wealth is something that you really want to do, you will find a way no matter what. Write your goals down. Read them out loud each day. You're the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So realize who you're associated with. And instead of saying, I can't do this, ask yourself, how can I do this? So then when it comes to like finding a good deal, right? So how to identify the right property? Well, ask yourself what does a good deal look like? Rather than saying, oh, there are no good deals out there. I can't find a good deal. I don't have the money. Say, how can I? Ask yourself, how can you afford the property? Rather than saying, I can't afford it. The next thing we're covering is studying the right source. So you want to read the right books. You want to look at the right content. Some things that I recommend are going on biggerpockets.com. That's where I've learned a ton of my education that I have. Studying Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and all of the books that they've put together can really give you a great idea of real estate investing. Listening to Gary Keller, Jay Papasan, Keller Williams, the podcast, those guys really know what they're talking about. They have hundreds of rental properties. So you want to read the right things, put the right information in your head, and listen to people that have succeeded. So get involved in coaching programs. That can help elevate your success, get you around the right people, and you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So the next key to rental property investing is picking the right plan. So you want to ask yourself, what is your end goal with real estate investing? What kind of strategy do you want to use? How often will you buy properties? What kind of properties do you want to buy? And how are you going to finance all of it? So we're going to cover what kind of properties there are, which will give you a good idea of maybe what you want to use for your plan. And we'll talk about financing more in the next week. So remember also, when you're creating your plan can change. You may start off thinking that I just want to buy a single family rental property. I just want to get into single family. And then you may change that and decide that, I'd rather buy like a 2 to 4 unit, small multifamily property, and maybe eventually even build up to 20, 40, 60, 80 unit apartment buildings. So we will help throughout this course to create the right plan for you. But first, I want you to ask yourself, like, why? Once you have that goal down and this is how many I want, this is how often I want to buy, you got to have a really strong why, or you will not take action on that plan. So ask yourself the question, like, what's most important to you? Why do you want to invest in real estate? After you have the answer to that question, then you'll be much more aligned with your goals. Do you want to help pay for your kids' college? Do you want to retire and travel the world with your spouse? Do you want to help break the cycle of poverty in your family's lineage? What's most important to you when it comes to investing in real estate? So the next key to rental property investing is going to be acquiring the right asset. You want to make sure that the properties you put your money into really put money back into your pocket, right? We all work hard for our money. The last thing we want to do is go and buy a property and it not make money. That can be a really great learning experience, but if we can avoid that, then let's do that, right? So you want to make sure that you don't go broke just buying good deals, because that can happen. You want to make sure that a deal isn't just a good deal, it fits your criteria and fits your plan. And we'll cover that more. So we'll cover multiple different types of properties, how to find a good property, how to create a plan that's right for you, your dreams and your goals. And so the next key to rental property investing is managing the right metrics. And we're going to cover managing the right metrics a little more next week. But with managing the right metrics, a metric is defined as a standard for measuring or evaluating something. So in terms of real estate, a metric would mean how is the property operating and how is it performing overall. Rental properties do require continual oversight. Unless you invest with somebody as like a passive investor and then they do all of the management of the deal, there will be oversight that's required when it comes to investing in real estate. So you want to ask the question to yourself, like, what has the cash flow been each month for this property that I'm looking at buying? How has the income of this property increased over the last couple of years? Have there been any rental rate increases, right? Because that would be a good thing to know. Then you know it's on an upward track towards growth. Have the expenses decreased or have the expenses increased? Maybe there's utilities that the owner is paying for that can actually be decreased, something like that, right? Has there been any appreciation in the market over the last 20, 10, 30 years? Next week, we'll talk more specifically about these metrics, but and what to measure and how to understand them. But that's just a little bit of an overview of some of the things that you want to be looking for and that you want to be managing as a rental property owner. So the next thing that we're going to cover is going to be the different types of rental properties. So right now, I'm going to give you an overview of the different types of buy and hold real estate investment properties that exist. Many people talk about fix and flips and buying distressed properties and then selling them for a profit, but we're not going to talk about that here. This is about building long-term wealth with an asset that pays you each month. So we're going to start off with single family. So most of us are very familiar with single family properties. We deal with them all the time as real estate agents. With single family properties, there's pros, there's cons to each type of these investments. So with single families, some of the pros are going to be that prices are based on comparables in the nearby market. So what has sold recently determines the value of the property. There are tons of single families out there. So there's definitely not a shortage of properties to go and look at to decide if they're going to be a good investment for you. There's a strong exit strategy in single family as a rental property because you can always sell them very quick compared to other types of real estate. And they're also, and it's easy compared to like larger deals or multifamily properties, commercial real estate, such things like that. There are less bills. Tenants in single family properties usually take over the utility payments for water, gas, and of course, electric. So that means the landlord or the property owner is paying less in utilities each month. So it's easier to finance single family properties. Banks and lenders are always willing to lend on these properties when you have good credit and your income looks okay. There are stable tenants. So they tend to stay longer than other types of properties because it's more personalized. They feel it's a less transitional property. So if somebody rents a single family property, they're likely, I mean, they could stay, definitely, of course, 1 year, but many stay for 5, 10 years, upwards of 2 years because they're families that don't want to move often, whereas maybe an apartment building would be more transitional housing. They stay there for, on average, less time. Now, these are also there's better appreciation in the single family market. So it's based on market prices, which is largely based on emotions and also based on the market. So you can sell high when the market's high and you can hold when the market's low because you're still making cash flow on that investment. Now, they're also less expensive than, let's say, an apartment building might be, right? So easier to get the money together. Now, the cons of single family houses, there's a high cost per unit. So you may be able to find a single family for, let's say, like in Chatham, 500, 600,000. Maybe you can find a duplex, a 2-unit for 800 or 900. So instead of paying, for 2 units each at 500,000, the second one might be a little bit discounted off that. So you can get more economies of scale. So with like a multifamily, so single family, higher cost per unit. It's also slower to scale the business. If your goal is to have 50 units by the end of the year or 50 units in the next 5 years, it's going to be a lot harder to close on 50 transactions than, maybe just one apartment building at 50 units per, right? So it's slower to scale the business. Building wealth one house at a time can take a lot longer because of the amount of transactions. So you scale you scale slowly. The next is that there are limited loans. So you are limited to a specific amount of Fannie, Freddie loans per their guidelines based on how many loans you have. So between 4 and 10, I think it's either 4 or 10 is the maximum that you personally can have as Fannie, Freddie, Mac loans. So there is a limit, and single family can raise your debt to income ratio level above banks, and that limit is set pretty quickly. Now, also, they're expensive rehabs. So when one tenant vacates, the turnover in an apartment complex, there's generally like a lower cost per vacancy transition to getting the unit ready for another renter. Now, because they haven't been there as long, right? The time that they're there is on average less than when you have somebody who lives in a single family home. So with a single family home, one of the pros is that, or one of the cons, sorry, is that it's going to be really expensive after they've been there for 5 years to do all of the renovations to get it ready for the next tenant. Now, the next con, the last one, is going to be more competition. So while you're fighting as an investor to find a good deal, it's most important that you look at the numbers. Well, people that are buying a property to live in, they don't care, what it could rent for. They want to live there. This is going to be a place they're going to live for a long time. So they're probably willing to pay more than you'd be willing to pay as an investor. So there's going to be more competition. They'll be willing to pay a higher price for the property they want. So now we're going to cover multifamily real estate. So while the value of a residential property is determined by what the similar houses down the road sold for, multifamily properties with greater than 5 units are considered commercial property. And the way that you value a commercial property compared to a residential property is different. Commercial properties are valued based on an ROI, or a return on investment. And we'll cover the details of that and also what's called a cap rate next week. So more properly, the value of a commercial property is based on the ROI when there is no debt used and an investor were to pay cash for the property. That's what a cap rate really is. It's the return on investment if somebody were to pay cash for a property. So cap rates are used to value the multifamily greater than 5 units. What's really cool is by increasing your income and decreasing your expenses, you increase the value of the property. So if a property down the road sells for a 10% cap rate, that means its net operating income would be $100,000. Let's say the value is $1 million. That would be a 10% cap rate. 100,000 divided by $1 million. Well, if I increase that net operating income to 120,000, the value of that property is now 1.2 million if it were to be sold at a 10% cap rate. So just by doing that, just by increasing the income and decreasing the expenses, I have now increased the value of my property. You see how you have more control over the value of a commercial asset? We'll dive deeper into that next week. I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of that so that you could understand, for those of us that don't know what a cap rate is or how that's used. I think it's one of the biggest benefits of multifamily investing in multifamily real estate. So now 2 to 4 unit multifamily is considered residential real estate. Those are not based on the cap rates when you value them. They're based on residential comparable sales. Okay, so the pros to multifamily real estate. Number 1 is more cash flow possibilities. Rents can be increased a small amount per year because of inflation, and you can decrease expenses, and that causes a ripple effect and huge increases of cash flow. If I had a 100 unit apartment building or even a 5-unit apartment building, and I decreased expenses by $20 per unit per month, for the 5-unit, that would be $100 less per month that I'm paying in expenses. So just by that one small move, I increased my cash flow for the property by $100 a unit. So economies of scale, if I have 100 units and I decrease the expenses by $20 per unit, that would be an increase in cash flow of about, I think, 20,000 off the top of my head. So you're looking at an incredible economies of scale by a very small decrease in expenses there. Now, the second way is one loan, multiple units or multiple doors. So by getting, if you were to go and buy 20 single family rentals, you would have to do 20 loan applications and close on 20 properties. That's a lot of work. Well, what if you could get 20 units with one loan application, one property purchase, one closing? You'd only have to review one record of financials. Sounds a lot easier to me. Now, there's definitely some hesitations when it comes to multifamily. We'll cover that. But in terms of the loan process, it's much easier for multifamily. And there are also specific types of loans that can only be used for multifamily. And we'll cover that later. But Fannie and Freddie loans are personally guaranteed. Multifamily real estate loans over $1 million are not personally guaranteed. They're only guaranteed by the business that owns the real estate, and the real estate is used as a collateral. So you actually have less risk in a way. So those loans, you do need to have experience to get most of those types of loans. So it's important to partner with somebody, but there can be less risk when it comes to that, when it comes to not personally guaranteeing a large loan like that. Okay, so the next thing is math over emotion. So this is all about the math, and you can easily separate emotion from the transaction. It's a business, that's it. Multifamily real estate is a business. And we'll dive deeper into that as well, the math and how to separate that from emotion. The next way is income valuation. As I mentioned before, multi-units with 5 or more, multifamily properties with 5 or more units are not valued the same as a single family property. So if a property down the street sold at a 10% ROI, then my multifamily will likely sell at the same value, but I can change the value internally by lowering expenses and increasing income. Therefore, I have control over the value of my property. When the income goes up and the expenses go down, the value goes up. So just think of that inverse relationship there. Now let's go over the cons of multifamily. So multifamily properties are going to be more expensive likely than single family properties. So typically there's a higher barrier to entry. Smaller multifamily properties have some lower down payment financing options like FHA and VA loans, just like single family residential. So I bought a 3-unit property with an FHA loan. There's certain guidelines that need to be met when you do get a small multifamily property with a loan like this. But what's really cool is you can live in the property as a primary residence and then make it an investment property later on. And that term is called house hacking, which I suggest for anyone that is like 18 to 30 years old, doesn't have a family yet. House hacking is an incredible strategy because you get to start building your wealth in your investment properties, and you also don't pay rent. You have other people paying your mortgage and you're living for free, hopefully, if you can find out and the numbers work well for you. And if you have any more questions on that, I'd be happy to talk to you about it. So the next con for multifamily is going to be management intensive. So generally, these units are more transitional. People do not stay as long, and they don't call it their real home. So management is often, in this case, you might want to get a third-party management company to take care of the asset for you, because you don't want to be as involved. You don't want to be taking, let's just say you had a 20-unit apartment complex. You wouldn't want to be taking care of all 20 units on your own. I'm sure that you have so much going on with family and business, and you'd want to have a third-party property management company that's a professional. And in the session 2 weeks from now, when we talk about who do you need on your team, we'll dive deeper into property management and identifying the right property management company. The next con for multifamily is going to be, it's more complicated. So it can be a lot harder to deal with all of the moving parts, and it can become expensive, because, for example, in New Jersey, a real estate agent cannot prepare a commercial real estate contract. So you have to get attorneys involved, and it can be more expensive for that. Also insurance costs, things like that. So also with multifamily, it's more scarce. So there's not an abundance of multifamily properties out there as there are single family properties. So there's much fewer to choose from. So many good ones are already bought, but what I see in the near future and how the market's going, and I'm not an expert by any means, but from the people that I talk to and what I see is there's a lot of people that are between the ages of 60 and 90 years old that own apartment complexes that are retiring, and they don't want to deal with building back up their occupancy and building back up their business after a recession hits. They probably did it in 2008, and there's going to be a lot of people that just want to leave the business. They just want to be done. So I do think in the next year, 2, 3, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to purchase distressed assets with owners that don't want to deal with it anymore. So, we're going to cover now, I didn't put it in the slides, but what we're going to cover is condos, townhomes, fixer-uppers, RE foreclosures. I just want you to be aware that there are other types of investing. So you can always do, foreclosures. You can find deals that are distressed like that. There are ways to purchase properties through tax deeds, which I'm not going to go into. You can buy condos or townhouses. You can buy them and sell them. Fixer-uppers are a great topic to talk about. So fixer-uppers can have less competition because people don't want to do the work, and there is immediate appreciation after you add value. So potentially there's even more cash flow down the road, because when you buy it and your loan is a lot lower than buying an already done property. So there are unique financing options like hard money and private money, different grants available for this type of deal for a fixer-upper. But you can buy a fixer-upper that's a multifamily or a single family. There's a strategy that I love. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, called the BRRRR strategy. Buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. So in 2018 or 2017, I bought a 2-unit property that I lived in. I lived in one of the units, rented out the other. I had a roommate. I bought it for $92,000. One of the units was condemned by the city because a sewer line needed to be fixed. So we had the seller fix the sewer line, and then my partner and I ended up putting in $16,000 total, so $8,000 each, to renovate the property inside one of the units and make it really nice and make it livable again. We had the city come out and inspect it. They said, all good, great. And then we had an appraisal, and it appraised for $140,000. So we were able to take out a home equity line of credit up to 90% loan to value. So around like $125,000 or something like that. And we got a $39,000 home equity line of credit. Well, I used my half of that home equity line of credit to then go and buy another property, the one with the FHA loan. So we bought it, we put some money into it. Immediately, the value skyrocketed. So we had immediate equity and immediate appreciation. And then we went and bought another property, So if you add value to something, in my opinion, real estate is amazing because you can add value to the community. That house was condemned. It was bringing down the property values of other properties in the area. We went in, we bought it, we renovated it, we made it no longer an eyesore. And now that property is worth over $150,000, and it cash flows $550 to me and $550 to my partner every month. And we only paid $92,000 to buy it, plus, you know, what we put in for renovations. So that is very similar to the strategy that I'm going to talk about now, which is called the BRRRR strategy. So for anybody that's interested, the BRRRR strategy was coined by Bigger Pockets. A man named Brandon Turner started Bigger Pockets and Josh Dorkin a number of years ago. I've been following them for like 4 or 5 years. Almost everything that I know, like I can be thankful to them and grateful to them for just putting content out there for free about real estate. And there's a great forum. All of my investor clients in Maryland that I've worked with, I found on Bigger Pockets because I post about deals, I post about different areas, and I found investor clients, like people just reach out to me. And I've closed 6 deals from people on Bigger Pockets, just reaching out and asking about real estate investing. So BRRRR strategy is you buy it, you renovate it, you rent it, you refinance it, and then you repeat. So everybody here hopefully knows what a cash out refinance is. If not, I'll go over it briefly. If I buy a property for $100,000 and I get a loan for 80% loan to value, and I put in some work, let's say, and I increase the value of the property to $200,000, just for simplicity of math. Well, now I can go back to the bank and I can say, hey, look, this property is now worth $200,000. I would like to get a loan at 80% loan to value for $160,000. Well, they're going to say, okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. And then it's going to pay off your first mortgage that you had. It's going to pay off the $80,000 mortgage. You'll probably have some closing costs and stuff that you need to pay. And then whatever's left is cash out to you, tax-free. So you've just taken out around $80,000, maybe $75,000 tax-free money that you can then go and use to buy another property. Now, if you're doing that, you probably had to do some renovations, you had some closing costs, but still, it's a great strategy to build your wealth quickly. And then you can take that and go buy another property, maybe go on a vacation, you know, something like that. So that's a great strategy. If you have any more questions, you can look it up on biggerpockets.com or ask me personally. So there can be more stress and more work involved with a fixer-upper. So you really need to find out what your plan is and see if it aligns with your plan. Maybe you don't want to go, you know, at 10 p.m. on a Friday and like put some backsplash up in a kitchen or something like that, which is cool. You know, painting is not the most fun thing. But you got to ask yourself, do I have the time? Is it worth it? How much work will this take? Is it over my head? Do I have the skills? And go from there. So the next thing, the next type of real estate is commercial real estate. So that would be offices, any, you know, big complexes like that, industrial real estate. I'm going to save that for another conversation, not even in this webinar series. I think multifamily and single family to talk about that is enough. And so you got to ask yourself, what type of property do I want to buy? What plan is right for me? How much do I need to invest in rental properties? And always remember, there's no right path. All of these paths work. It really just depends on what works best in your area, with your budget, within your time frame, and with the skills that you have. Any types of rentals can help you to achieve financial freedom. So the next thing we're going to cover is location, location, location. So we live in New Jersey, in Morris County, Essex, Union County. We live in an expensive area. It can be hard to find properties that have positive cash flow, but it's definitely not impossible. It is if you tell yourself it is, but it definitely is not impossible. Opportunities don't just exist. You have to create those opportunities. You have to go out and find them, and you need to create them. So are you looking for homes on sale? Have you dialed into the type of real estate that you want to buy? right? And then the purpose of this and what we're going over today is to really give you an idea of what to look out for and consider when analyzing locations, and also to provide some resources where you can investigate these indicators more and more in depth. Someone once told me eds, meds, and feds. So this isn't on the slide, but I want you to remember education, medical, and federal or government. So you always want to look for properties that are near education facilities, such as public schools and colleges. You want to be near hospitals and medical clinics because it means local economic presence and jobs nearby. Just being near government jobs and local government facilities also, such as downtowns, means local jobs that people can maybe even walk to. Both of my properties that I own in Maryland are less than a quarter mile from a hospital, downtown government office buildings, and it's a mile and a half away from an 8,000 or 9,000 person undergrad university that's public school. So it's close to all of those things because I knew that those were important things when looking at an investment property. So downtowns of cities, towns usually have these things. So keep that in mind. Neighborhood classes. So there are 4 classes when it comes to location and also building class. So class A are going to be new buildings. Wealthy people usually live nearby. They have the best schools, the hottest restaurants, hardwood floors, granite countertops, generally command high rent, but they have a lower cash flow because the purchase price is generally higher for these properties. So the higher the purchase price and the more demand for those types of properties, the lower the cash flow is going to be. Class B, slightly older than Class A, probably 15 to 30 years old with some upgrades, but higher maintenance costs because they are older, and rental income a little lower than Class A areas are going to be. Then you have Class C. So Class C, likely lower income areas with older houses, 30 years or older. You might see pawn shops or check cashing businesses on the corner. Typically, they have a lower rent, but much more affordable prices to pay and to buy for a property. And usually the systems such as plumbing and electric are going to be a little bit outdated. Maybe they're 30 years old, something like that. Class D properties are going to be war zones that you wouldn't want to live in. I always, I'm not going to steer anybody into an area or a certain neighborhood, but what I can say is I would or I wouldn't live there, and I would definitely not live in a Class D area. And you'll know it when you see it. So I don't recommend getting involved for any purposes, any investment purposes in those areas. And you can use crime reporting to understand the areas that you're looking at. Population growth. A growing population means that you can raise rents over time and that people are moving to the area, which is a good sign of job growth and also that there's going to be a demand for housing. I think that we're going to see a lot of people move out of the cities in the next couple of years, like big cities like New York City. People are going to move suburban because hopefully we don't even have to commute to work. Everything's going to go digital and more technology based. So people are going to want to move to the suburbs. There's going to be a big demand for housing in the suburbs compared to in the inner cities. Rent to own ratio, how many people rent versus own? A strong rental market may mean high supply, but it also means high demand. So you know that your units can be filled quickly. So you want to talk to your property management companies. We'll cover that in 2 weeks. More about like, what are the vacancy rates in your area? How long do properties sit on the market for? And you can learn that by just calling a property management company saying, hey, what's your vacancy rate at this apartment complex? Or what's your overall vacancy rate for your portfolio? And you'll get an idea of what the area is like and what vacancy it operates at. And then you use that in your model to develop your cash flow, which we'll talk about next week. So property taxes and insurance rates. What floodplain is the property in? Is it in a 100-year floodplain? If not, then it most likely doesn't require flood insurance, but you want to look at that. How high are the property taxes in that area? And then the price to rent ratio. So this is a metric that I use when looking at properties to invest in for specific metrics. So if you take the median monthly rental price, let's say it's $1,000 per month for a rental, and then you divide it by the median sales price, let's say that's $100,000, you get the price to rent ratio. And that would be, in that scenario, 1%. So you generally want the number to be greater than 1%. Things can still cash flow at lower than 1%. But for example, if you have a $500,000 single family and it only rents for $2,500 a month, that would be a 0.5% price to rent ratio. Not something that I would invest in personally. And we'll cover that in depth next week. So the other things that you want to be on lookout for, transportation. Is it in a train line to New York City? That could be really big, right? People are transporting, working, moving into New York, or, going into New York City for work. I think that that'll be a little bit less, as I mentioned to you, in the future, but I don't know. Proximity to local businesses. Are there local businesses in the area? How close are the properties to that? And now we're going to cover how to find rental properties. So there's a number of different ways. There's more ways than just listed right here. This is just a simple overview of some ways that you can find properties. So the first way is going to be the MLS. So if you're a real estate agent, you can do this yourself, or you can find a real estate agent that helps you out. You can set up automatic alerts for specific types of properties in locations that you want to find. You can screen out the duds super quickly just by doing a quick calculation, maybe like the price to rent ratio that I just showed you, or whatever works best for you and your situation and your plan. You can look for hidden value opportunities within that. Be quick, because when things hit the MLS, they go fast usually, especially investment properties. They're usually sold off market before they even hit the MLS, the good ones. And you want to make lots of offers and fail often. Just go, do your best to make offers, put your name out there, tell people what you're looking for. I would go and find off-market properties by calling management companies and saying, hey, are any of your investors or your owners looking to sell their properties? I would go on rental registries. So every city, most of them, have a rental registry list of all of the people that own rental properties and the addresses of those properties. Most of the time, they even have the phone number for the person that owns it right there, and you can just call them. And I've cold called a number of rental property owners just by finding them through that source and asking them, hey, are you interested in selling your property right now? If not, okay, maybe the next 6 months, give them a call again. But there's so many ways that you can do that. So the next thing is work when no one else is working. Things might come on the MLS at like 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. or 12 a.m. at night. And if you're working then you might have the leg up compared to other people. It depends on how much you want to work. So then also direct mail marketing for deals. You can do mass direct mail marketing. You can pick a neighborhood and send out a letter. Hey, I'm looking to buy properties just like yours. Pick a neighborhood that you want, that has the type of property that you want, and just make great offers as much as you can. What I would do is I used to call owners, and I still do. I call them and send them a piece of mail and say, hey, I'm really interested in buying your property. Send them maybe a couple before they answer. And then finally, when I give them a call, they know who I am. I've already sent them multiple letters. So you can also do what's called driving for dollars to find the neighborhoods that you want. So, go drive through a neighborhood, go drive through town, just look for the type of properties that you want. You see an apartment building or you see a single family house that might look distressed, type in the address, go on the tax records, see if you can find their phone number after finding their name, and look for that information, and then give them a call. You can cold call rental owners, as I mentioned. You can look through eviction records to find struggling landlords that might need help to sell their properties after an eviction. There's going to be a lot of things that need to be done to get it back up. Usually you can spend months and months in the court system, which can really take a hit for property owners. Maybe they're just done with it. Maybe they want to sell. Check out eviction records. You can check out Craigslist. Sellers, even landlords with rentals, they can be there they can be there all the time. And then wholesalers. Wholesalers are a great way to find off-market properties. They've already done all the work for you. A wholesaler basically goes and finds a property which has a distressed owner, maybe somebody that really just wants to get out of their property. They haven't paid their taxes or they haven't paid their mortgage and they just want to sell. So you can go reach out to a wholesaler who usually gets property under contract, and then they sell you or assign the contract to you. And in some states it's allowed, some states it's different. So you got to kind of do that work to figure out if it's good for you and what your plan is. And yeah, there's a couple more things that I just want to touch on real quick, kind of broad overview. You want to find properties that have more bedrooms, because more bedrooms means longer term tenants, usually families and such that move in. So 1 or 2 bedrooms might be like a young professional or a college student, whereas like 3 to 4 bedrooms is a family. They're probably going to live longer in that unit. The older the property, the more expensive it's going to be to fix it up. So many people have criteria, at least people that I talk to, they have a criteria of like, I'm not going to buy a property that's built before 1980 or 1985. Maybe it has asbestos or lead paint or something going on in it that is outdated, that's going to cost a lot of money to fix in the future, and I just don't want to have that headache. Now, you can always find a diamond in the rough if you look hard enough. You can always find something that's going to fit your plan and your criteria if you look hard enough. Never tell yourself that you can't do it, because you always can. There's always an opportunity out there. You just got to go create that opportunity. So to close this out for today, I want to mention a couple things about what we discussed. So economies of scale are super important when it comes to real estate. So with multifamily, you could have between 2 and 20 units compared to 1 single family house with 1 unit, and all of those units could be under 1 roof. So that's 1 roof to replace instead of 20 roofs, right? So you have economies of scale. It's the same thing with utilities. You can sub-meter the utilities so that you're not paying for all of it, and each unit is individually paying for their utilities. Now, many people think that it can be more risky to buy more units, right? Or a large apartment building. The thing is, the costs are higher and more money is usually at stake. But the truth is, in my opinion, it's less risky. And I'm not guaranteeing anything, but if you look at a lot of real estate investors, multifamily can be less risky, because if a tenant moves out of a single family home, you have a 100% vacant house. Nobody's paying your rent. Nobody's paying your mortgage. Nobody's paying their rent. But if you have a 4 unit and 1 tenant moves out, you have 75% occupancy and only 25% vacancy. So, as I said, also with the roofs, rather than having 1 roof for 1 unit, maybe 1 roof for 4 units, right? So you can get started with small amounts of money. I told you the first example of when I got started at 21 years old, buying my first property, or 22 years old. And you can partner with other people as well. You don't have to do this alone. In 2 weeks, we'll talk about who do you need on your team for investing in real estate. And you definitely don't have to do this on your own. You need to have the right team. You need to have the right people involved. We can never do anything alone. All together is the best way. So if you find a good deal, money will always find you. There is an abundance of resources in this world, an abundance of people with money that all want to put it to work for themselves. And what better to put it in than real estate? I'm sure that you all know people who have invested in real estate or are looking for real estate. So you can always find the money. The money will always find you if you find a good deal. So the key is to focus, follow one course until you're successful. It's always okay to change your plan, but you want to figure out what plan is best for you. And whatever you do, just get good at it. So the next parts of our series together, it's a 5-part series. Today was number 2. All of these are being recorded, so they will be put out in case you want to go and review it again. The next parts, next week, we're going to talk about facts and figures, the numbers behind the deal. We're going to talk about all that good stuff, get down to the nitty-gritty. And the next part is people matter. Who do you need to have on your team? And the final session will be called Next Steps and Creating Your Action Plan. So we'll dive deep into how to best create your own action plan. And as always, everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about real estate with you. It's amazing to just share what I've learned. And if you have any questions, I'm always available to talk.